So, team preview number 10, it's time to drop into the Los Angeles Gladiators in our previews ahead of the Overwatch League season for 2021. It's not that far away now, actually, so, we're grinding through these, halfway through them and everything. Gladiators. Gladiators are going to be an interesting team this season, that's for sure. So, Gladiators have been a fairly consistently good team in the Overwatch League, and in 2020 actually represented their worst finish ever in the league. So, in 2018, the inaugural season, Gladiators finished 4th out of the 12 teams we had back then. They were a very good team, and that carried over into 2019, where we saw them finished 5th once again, and that's actually really good considering that the league expanded that year to 20 teams instead of 12. So Gladiators maintaining a still very, very good finish, despite the expanded league. However, 2020 did see them drop to 9th, back behind their LA rivals, and that's a bit of a shame, and it has it's caused a change in the Gladiators roster, and that's what we're going to look to in this video. But let's first of all look at the coaching side of things for the Gladiators this season. There isn't actually any change, so this I kind of like. I mean, I said there's no change, there's no additions, there's only, well, there is one addition. There is one addition, and that's Ty Dollar. Now, Ty Dollar is, again, he comes into assist, face, and DP, but I think he's going to be, I think he's going to be good for the Gladiators. DP is obviously the known name of the Gladiators coaching staff, and has been very outspoken about certain things concerning a certain LA team, or a certain team. Can we really say they represent LA? But anyway, they have however let go of Forstis and Curry Shot, who were an assistant coach and a strategic coach last year. There have also been the release of a translator as well. However, translators are not going to be needed now. They're bringing in Ty Dollar. He's the only Korean influence in this coaching staff of the Los Angeles Gladiators, and I think that's going to be cool. Now, going over to their roster, this is where we see things change. So, a lot of people going out, and a lot of substantial names. 2 very big names, in fact, for the Gladiators. So, first of all, we see Jarrow going out. We didn't see Jarrow do much for the DPS line of the Gladiators last season. We didn't see him really get involved in any amount. So, he's retiring, and I do wish him all the best going into whatever he does next. We do see Bishu let go for the second time, I think, for the Gladiators. Again, Bishu hasn't found a team since then, and it's not too much of a surprise. They didn't utilize him too much considering they have space. Then we see the big hitters go. So this is the very, very well-known support duo of the Gladiators that they've had since the inaugural season. This is Big Goose and Shaz. Now, Big Goose and Shaz, they were always a pairing, and when one goes, they both go, and they've both retired. So that is a very big shift for the Gladiators. Very, very big shift, because this is 2 supports that, okay, they may not have been the best in the league, but they are 2 supports that created a backbone for the Gladiators roster, which means the Gladiators are heading into unknown territory in this 2021 season. So that one's going to be a very, very interesting one to keep an eye on. And then we have 2 tanks let go, 2 main tanks, LH Cloudy moving out, he's going back down to Contenders. And then we see, I think LH Cloudy's in Contenders NA now? I can't remember exactly for which team. I can't remember exactly for which team, I know he's doing well though. And then we see OG, who is moving out to the Florida Mayhem. Now, OG was a weak link, in my opinion, for the Gladiators last season. He's never done well on a mixed roster. He demonstrated that at Dallas Fuel. Gladiators haven't had a stable main tank, in my opinion, since they had Fisher. And obviously, Fisher has his issues. So then Gladiators are looking for that stability again. I think that's what they need. And I think that's what they suffered for in 2020. So that's the people that we've seen let go by the Gladiators in this offseason. The question is, how does this new Los Angeles Gladiators roster look? Well, there's obviously 4 retained from last season. These will be Space, Birdering, and Mirror. Now, they were brought in at the end of 2019. And then midway through 2020, they also brought in Kevster, and Kevster will be staying on as well. Kevster is known as the prophet or rascal of EU. He's incredibly flexible, so I'm not surprised, and actually really good. So I'm not surprised they've kept hold of Kevster. Mira's going to be almost certainly a backup DPS this season behind Birdwing and Kevster. I would imagine that. Birdwing has still got great mechanical skill, and Space, again, is a really good off-tank. People have their down parts about Space. So I don't know really why. He had a good season last season. Yeah, he may not be the strongest on every single off-tank, but he is a very good stable off-tank for the Gladiators. I'm not surprised they've retained him. Now, this is where things get interesting, because we have 4 new incomers to the Gladiators to create an 8-man roster. It's not a chunky roster, but again, we're not seeing many chunky rosters in this season of the Overwatch League. That's not the way the teams are going. Cost cutting, COVID, etc. We're going to see cut down rosters because there's no homestands. And there may be a change in the format for the Overwatch League going forward anyway, but again, that's a different video. So this means we're going to see 3 new supports and a main tank. So the main tank is going to be Muse. Now Muse is a really hot prospect and a really smart signing from the Gladiators in my opinion. He's obviously Korean, but he spent a lot of time on a mixed roster. He was with the Eternal Academy back when they were playing in EU contenders. And he was inactive after the Eternal Academy disbanded. Then he went to WGS Phoenix on a loan. Then he went to 200 MS, which was a team that competed in North American contenders, but was on high ping. A lot of them from Korea. I presume Muse was from Korea as well. So he's played on rosters, and I believe the management of 200 MS was American. So he has played consistently on mixed teams. Eternal Academy, even Talon back in the day. WGS wasn't mixed, but 200 MS as well. He would have had to have known English. So Muse is actually a really smart signing to fit into this really mixed Gladiators roster. Not only that, Muse is a really good main tank. Like, he's flexible. We've seen him demonstrate very good Winston play recently in the Steel Series Invitational, so that is also really promising. I really do believe that in this season, Muse could be a breakthrough main tank. Like, big time. Partnered with Space, this could be a really good tank duo. And I think it's a really smart, really good pickup from the Gladiators. I don't think there is a better main tank they could have secured. In terms of how he's just going to slot into the team. Yes, it's his first shot at the league. So again, we have to have these caveats, right? We have to say, well, we don't know how he's going to step up to the league, etc, etc, etc. But I don't think he's going to be that bad. He did well in Contenders Pacific. He did well in Contenders Korea with WGS, the small time he was there. And then he also did very well with the Steel Series Invitational when he was with the Gladiators against Overwatch League opposition. So I think, although this is very early indications, I think Muse is going to be good for the Gladiators. And I think, again, it's one of the smartest pickups in this offseason, in my opinion. One of the smartest pickups in terms of how he just slots in. And he'll be very good at knitting this team together. Because there are 2 players that, again, I'm making assumptions here, but have not played on massively mixed rosters. Now, one of them is a caveat, because one of them comes from the Guangzhou Charge. It's who we're going to talk about next, because this is the support player, Shu. So Shu is going to be the flex support for the Gladiators. Shu coming in from Guangzhou Charge is a massive loss for Guangzhou Charge, but a massive gain for the Gladiators. So Shu, I would imagine, can speak English and can fit in, because, yeah, like, he's been on the Guangzhou Charge, and Guangzhou Charge were slightly mixed at times. Wasn't massively mixed, but he was kind of mixed. So that's not going to be too much of an issue there. And then compare him to Shaz, who was the person who was filling his role previously. I think this is actually a substantial upgrade for the Gladiators. And I think Shu is going to be good, like real good. And I think he could actually be possibly better than what he was at Guangzhou Charge. Because I think he's possibly got better players around him than he had at Guangzhou Charge. When you see the quality that Kevster has, Birdring has, Space has, Muse has, it's going to be a potentially very stacked roster for Gladiators when we look at it. It obviously depends on season performance, and that is something we have to take into account. They have a difficult first 2 games of the season, I'm not going to lie, but Gladiators are a team that could be, I would say, top 5 at least. And it's built off of, yes, there's a bit of Overwatch League experience with the likes of Muse, but there's also extensive League experience as well. I think the balance for the Gladiators is actually really good. Better than possibly any other team in the league right now that has had a major reshuffle of its roster. So I think the scouting and team building of the organization at the Gladiators has been extremely good in this offseason, because Shu is going to have a main support partner. They have yoinked him from the San Francisco Shock. We were expecting it for a while. It eventually came in. This is Moss. So this is, again, Moss was the backbone for the San Francisco Shock. Like, he is featured for that team for 3 years and won 2 championships with them. He is one of the most experienced players in the league, and although he may not be the biggest of pop-off players, I suppose is the way to say it, he is a very, very, very consistent main support. Like, incredibly consistent main support. And he will be good. Now, of course, people will run out and say, we have not seen him on anyone else but the Shock. And to an extent, we can agree. Do I think Moth is going to just plummet because he's not at the Shock? No, I really don't think that's going to happen. I think Moth, even if he doesn't hit the heights he did at the Shock, he will still be incredibly consistent, and paired with someone like Shu, we're looking at an incredibly good support line for the Gladiators. And then you're going to pair it with Muse in Space, which is a really good tank line, and then Kevster, Birdring, Mirror. Damn, that's starting to look real good, right? So Gladiators are not messing around. They are really not messing around, and the final addition to their roster will be another support. This is another flex support coming in from OZ Gaming. This is Skewed. So this is very interesting, because Skewed, he's another one of these players that have come from OZ Gaming. OZ Gaming don't have, like, a massive, should we say, trophy cabinet? Yet there is a lot of players being picked up from this OZ Gaming lineup, and there must be something in them. I believe Skewed has been brought in to be more of a Brigitte player. He does have a good Brigitte, and if that is one thing we can say about Moss, he does have a slight maybe weakness on Brigitte. So I think that is why Skewed is on this roster. And it does round out the Gladiators very well. I really like this balance that the Gladiators have struck. 3 supports, 3 DPS, and 2 tanks. You've got a reliable tank line that is not going to change. You're not going to be chopping and changing it, and that means it can always be counted on. You've got a base from always in which you can work from and not disrupt. It means that the team is not constantly changing, and there's always something to build around. Moth and Shu I would expect to be the most used support line for the Gladiators when we look at the current meta, which in either case would be a Moth Shu support line, I would imagine. Like, we are not seeing a massive amount. We're seeing a lot of Batiste and a lot of Lucio, especially in EU Rush. And that's just going to be Shu and Moth, simple as that. Skewed is, I really think, just going to come in for Brig when needed. And then we look at Birdring, Mirror, and Kevster, which is a DPS line that should have pretty much everything covered. Now, the only thing that worried me during the Steel Series Invitational is that we saw the Gladiators take on London Spitfire, and Birdring played Sombra, and Birdring's Sombra was matched by Blase, and that is not something I would have expected, and that worries me. And I worry that the Gladiators might have a weakness on Sombra. However, Gladiators will most likely have taken into the fact that they are in the North American region, unlike their counterparts at the other side of LA. But they are in the NA region. And the NA region tends to play a lot less Sombra than the Asian region, or the East region, I should say, does tend to. I'm expecting quite a bit of Sombra in the East region, actually. We tend to see it a lot, and they normally, actually, when NA are playing more Tracer, sometimes the East region will tend to just shoehorn that Sombra in instead of the Tracer, because of the power of EMP, and you would expect that more in the East region. If Gladiators were in the East region, I would be worried. But because they're in NA, unless we go into a real solid Sombra meta, which right now we're not, then the Gladiators will be okay. But if that solid Sombra meta does come around, that is the one weakness I see in this Gladiator squad. That's the one weakness I see in it. The one sort of hole that has not been covered. Especially with the way in which Birdwing played during that Invitational. So, it's going to be an interesting one to take a look at as the season develops. But let's take a look at the first 6 fixtures for the Gladiators. I did mention they had a tough start to things. Their first 2 matches, which will be in the first week of the season, will be against the San Francisco Shock. That is not going to be easy, but it will also be a very big water tester. Because can the Gladiators hang with a Shock? Because if they can, they'll be one of the best teams in this league. Simple as. But we do have to maintain the fact that San Francisco Shock last year had an extremely slow start to the season. I believe in the first week they had both LA teams and lost both. Something like that. So that's something we have to take into account for the Shock. But if Gladiators can get anything from that shot match, or even make it very close, then that is very good. Then in the second match of the season, they have the Dallas Fuel. Now we're expecting the Dallas Fuel to be very good, right? Because of their new all-Korean lineup with Russia's head coach. And Dallas, this should be a real barnstormer of a match, right? This should be really good Overwatch to watch, okay? But I still think Gladiators will beat Dallas. I think Gladiators will beat Dallas. And providing they do, and then don't slip up in any of their other matches from there on, for the first 6 games of the season, if they go 5-1 at the start of the season, Gladiators are definitely on track for the top 5. In my opinion, in the very early stages. If they go 6-0, gosh darn, that will be spicy. That'll be spicy. But I'm not expecting that. I don't think anyone will expect the Gladiators to beat the Shock, although I do think they can do it, and it would be one hell of a story to see Moth take down his old team. But it's going to be, it would be very tough, and it would be unexpected, and it would be an upset, and it would be one hell of the way to start off the season, that's for sure. But then after that, we see the Gladiators in week 2 match up against London. London took them to a 3-2 match in the Still Series Invitational, but that was an early season invitational. That is something we have to take into account. It will represent probably a clash in styles unless the meta changes. So, yeah, I still think the Gladiators will have too much for London, although London may be able to nick a map or something. Then we see in the same week them take on the Boston Uprising. Boston Uprising got pasted by the Gladiators in the Still Series Invitational, 3-0. Like, it wasn't close. It was quite clear that the Gladiators were the better team. So I wouldn't expect it to change too much. Maybe Boston step up slightly, have improved since then, take a map off the Gladiators or something, but I still think Gladiators are going to have too much for Boston. There's a lot of experience. There's a balance of experience and inexperience at Boston, but there's also much more experienced coaching at the Gladiators, which is something we take into account here as well. Then the Gladiators have Vancouver. That should be an absolute pasting. That should not be close. Gladiators should absolutely smack the Vancouver Titans. I would expect them to 3-0 them very, very quickly. It's as simple as that. And then they have Atlanta Reign, which again I would expect the Gladiators to win. Although the Atlanta Reign may be able to take a map off the Gladiators, it shouldn't be an absolute walkover like Vancouver should be, but it should be a fairly good Gladiators win all the same. Similar to London, I would say. But I would hope that at least the Gladiators go 4-2 in the first 6 games of the season. The better one, or the ideal case, would be 5-1. The overachievement would be 6-0 for the Gladiators, in my opinion, in these first 6 games of the season. If they get 6-0, that will be amazing. That will be Gladiators being talked about as, oh, okay, hold on, Shock have got an issue here. They're gonna be contending with a very, very, very good team here. That'll start getting some question marks asked of the best teams in the league. Can they keep up with this Gladiator squad if they go 6-0 in this first 6 games? But again, that's a lot of hypothesis. That's a lot of prediction, a lot of thinking. We do not know until we head into the season. And yes, that's the Los Angeles Gladiators. This is a super interesting team. Definitely the LA team to root for, am I right? But talking of LA teams, can we call them LA anymore? It's the Immortals Valiant next, isn't it? Oh boy, that's gonna be a fun video. I hope you can all join me for that one. Make sure you've got the bell on, so then you will be notified when that video goes live. And also, all the socials are linked in the video description as per usual for Illusion Gaming and myself. Follow me over there on Twitter, on Twitch, there's the Discord server. There's a Discord server that's having a big, remake before the Overwatch League season starts, which is really cool, because then we got a new IRL section where you can talk about stuff like that, Overwatch League, predictions, etc., contenders. All of that is in there. It's great to talk about, so do join that if you want to have a big discussion, and I'm always available in there, so yeah, don't forget that one. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you'd like to give a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.